It's Friday the 7th of June. This is the Climate Alarm Clock. This week's headlines: elections just around the corner, but can you even make it around the corner in Dublin with all the bike lanes anymore? Not according to Regina Doherty, you can't. Irish consumers struggle to identify greenwashing, and Ireland faces big fines for missing climate targets. Hello and welcome to the Climate Alarm Clock, your Irish climate news podcast. I'm Dara Wynne, and Anna Pringle is not here with us today and has major FOMO
We've
that
kicked
she's
her out.
She has major FOMO that she's missing out, but joined by Ciara Daly. Ciara, how are you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good, thanks, and really delighted to be joined by regular contributor at this stage, I'd say, Tom Spencer. Tom, welcome back. How are things?
Woo-woo!
Hey, thanks for having me back.
Yeah, great to have you back, and really glad that I'm here when you're back. I feel the last few times you've been on, it's because I haven't been around, and then I listen back and I think, oh, Tom's great. I wish I was having this conversation with him instead of listening. So
It's not on purpose that he turns up when you're not around, so you know.
But yeah, great to have you. So before we get stuck into our stories, a reminder: if you want to support the work we do, you can do that on buymeacoffee.com/the climate alarm. And thanks, we had a couple of contributors this week. Anya, who bought a few coffees for us and said, keep up the great work. And Thomas, who bought some coffees and said, gave up on having a regular form of payment. So this is Thomas, who was asking for a Patreon and has finally caved and contributed via Buy Me a Coffee. So thanks very much for that. So I feel like I'm a bit worn out from talking about elections, but if you're listening to this, it's probably the eve or the day of elections. But one story I think that's worth covering in relation to the elections is what Regina Doherty has come out and said about the Greens and the bike lanes in Dublin. Unbelievable comments, I think, from her, where she's pledged to act as a watchdog when it comes to the European Green agenda, and says we need to combat the overmighty Greens in Europe. She goes on to say that the Greens are doing more harm than good to the climate change agenda. They've lost the political dressing room, and said that they have turned Dublin into a spaghetti junction of cycle lanes that have divided the city like East and West Berlin. And goes on with a couple of other interesting comments, to say the least. So I'm not sure what either of you think about that.
I can hear Anna screaming
Gosh.
from a distance. I mean, it's just laughable, really. Like, this is classic culture war stuff. And when she's talking about accountability from another party, you look at the WWF's EU Parliament scoreboard for climate action. Her party scores 45 out of 100. The Greens are scoring 96. So if she's talking about accountability and sort of a watchdog for what people are doing, what is Fine Gael doing? All it's doing is failing, and it's failing doubly as hard as the Greens are. So yeah, it would be funny if it wasn't so sad, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. So for me, I think what's really compounded the anger for me in her comments is her election campaign, which is just bizarre. Earlier this week, she put out a video of her standing in front of the portal, kind of like that scene from Love Actually, but talking about her election plans to people who can't vote for her. And then she gotten some people to like appear the other side of the portal with a Vote Regina Doherty thing. And it's like, talk about the issues. Like, what is this? And she put up a poem about some fish and chip shop as well a couple of weeks ago. And it's kind of like, how do you have any credibility to talk about, to talk about the issues and what other parties are doing when your campaign is just so devoid of any content, any policy? It's just you going around doing kind of weird publicity stunts.
Can I ask, because I'm not in Dublin and I'm definitely not familiar with the cycle lanes up there. Look, obviously, I think the comparison, she made some comparison about the cycle lanes being, the equivalent to the Berlin Wall. And obviously, the comparison of cycle lanes in Dublin to, a period that is marked by such kind of significant human suffering is not, it really trivializes something that's really serious. But in terms of, if she had to have used a less extreme metaphor, is that, like, would it be fair to say what are the state of these cycle lanes that she's taking issue with in Dublin? Because for people outside of Dublin, I suppose, is what I'm wondering.
So I suppose the overall context, and I did hear Eamon Ryan saying something during the week that, we need change and the change part is hard. So if we are changing our transport system to be more green and more kind of active, then there will be difficult transitions where two-way roads will become one-way roads, where some streets will be replaced with bus lanes or cycle lanes. So there have been changes, but I don't have the statistics to hand. The number of cars in Dublin City has been reducing for the last number of years. And so you can't get to that place of better public transport and better cycle lanes without change. Having said that, like, it's still a real patchwork. It's not like every street in Dublin has a cycle lane. Most of the cycle lanes, I would say, are just painted on. So they haven't really taken away road space. So I think it's a bit exaggerated, her claims, anyways.
Yeah.
Would be my.
There's this laughable line, which is the Greens are enthralled to the cyclist lobby.
Yes.
Which, like, I write about cars a hell of a lot. And, like, look, one of the things we can say about cars is there is a lot of lobbying. In fact, last time I was on, we were talking about how car manufacturers they are the ones who are stopping the EV revolution themselves a lot of the time. Cyclists as a lobbying group, well, they don't have any money. There is no big bike. There is, in the same way there is big agri or big pharma, there is no big bike. So, like, what she's talking about actually is citizens, like ordinary people, have said, we'd like to cycle a bit more, please, and maybe not be killed while we're doing it. Like, that's the lobbyist group that the Greens are enthralled to. Like, it's this is just pure cultural stuff.
Yeah, I thought that I was laughing the whole way through saying that because I forgot about that the cyclist lobby. I think one thing for me, Justin, actually, I'll give it a shout out anyways, is the last Friday of every month there is this thing called the I Bike Bop, and I suppose maybe they're the cyclist lobby. The last Friday of every month there's a cycle that starts on the north side, usually around the Hugh Lane Gallery, and finishes up on the south side, I think near Stephen's Green, and it's a kind of collective cycle. People get together. There's a couple of cargo bikes that have speakers on it, and so it's like maybe 100 people cycling through Dublin City from about 6 to 7:30 on a Friday evening. And it's great crack. And it's
disgusting.
But
that's what's wrong with this country.
Yeah, exactly. It's terrible, but it's so much fun. And you're cycling with other people and you're in one big block, so there's not any cars coming. And it's a real vision of what the city could be like, and it's really lovely, really good fun, really engaging, enjoyable climate action. So just a shout out to that. And I suppose the other thing to say is that other countries like Paris, since COVID, have really just transformed the way people get around the city, put in really good incentives. France, I think it was France put in an incentive that if you trade, you can trade in your car and get a really good grant for an e-bike. And have put in loads of cycle lanes, and it's been great. Obviously there's been objections. I'm sure there were objections there, but there was, a long-term plan, a long-term vision, and they're kind of incorporating that. Whereas there just seems to be so many politicians and vested interests like Regina Doherty kind of dragging their heels, dragging their knuckles when it comes to any kind of change.
So obviously Fine Gael is the party of big business, and there's a line in here, even Guinness trucks and builders lorries can't get into the city. Now, look, I'm a blow-in, but I'm pretty sure one of the reasons the canal is right next to the Guinness factory is because they used canals to move their products around the country before. Like, we only have to look back in a relatively recent history to see that this traffic problem is relatively new. It's caused by cars. It's caused by big business. Like, why not move back to some of those older ways that are infinitely more sustainable and will benefit businesses like Guinness? It's such an easy switch for them to make.
So that was her. She had put out a press release because she wanted to delay the Dublin City Centre Transport Plan, if I have that right, which is a project that's aimed at speeding up climate action, helping us save the planet, that kind of hot pie in the sky kind of stuff. But she had put out that statement that the Guinness trucks and builders lorries couldn't get into the city. But there was actually, when you go into the plan, there's not even a ban. Like, what she said wasn't even true. Like, she was just talking complete rubbish. So it's that sort of thing of, like, she's just kind of saying anything that sounds a bit shocking and sounds a bit populist, but it doesn't actually have any real substance or even truth
Yeah,
behind it, which is kind of wild
yeah, and I think, yeah, and I don't.
and really irresponsible.
Yeah, and I don't know.
From a leader.
Yeah, I don't know which one of you said it right before coming on the call, but there's just so much of that around election time, and I'm not sure if we mentioned it last week, but a really good way to cut through that is a website. So if you're listening to this before the elections, there's a website called whichcandidate.ie. You can go on and select your European constituency, and you answer, I think it's about 15 questions, and they've asked the questions to those candidates as well. And so you can see which politicians align with your views, which is really good. It's a really, really good way of cutting through the nonsense. And some of them have given kind of rationale for why they've chosen certain answers. So if you're listening to this before you voted and you're still up in the air, highly recommend that.
Can I say also, one of the things I thought was interesting about this article, and it kind of echoed. So last night I went for a sauna because I'm practicing for climate change. I'm training. And there was a discussion going on about the bloody Greens, and people were chatting, and I'm not really sure what anyone was saying, and I'm not like putting anyone down or anything like that. I'm as bad as the next person is engaging in a conversation about politics. But we were all kind of just having, to be honest, a bit of a bitch with no real substance behind what we were actually giving out about. But one of the points actually that I suppose echoed what that conversation was last night, she had said that the Greens, their autocratic style of government means they talk down to people when they should consult with them. And I suppose that's what half of the feeling in the sauna was last night, that people just kind of couldn't relate to them as a party. So do you think that she actually has a bit of a point in what she's saying when we kind of turn, like, if we forget the rest of the rubbish she's talking, in terms of her, I suppose, her analysis of how the Greens are relating to the general voter? Does she have a point there?
I think you could say, I think you could say they have a point. I think there is, for me, the overall bigger picture is that the climate issue shouldn't just be the Greens issue, So the Greens, as well as having to like communicate and consult, they also have to cut through all the bullshit from a lot of the other parties, and particularly Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, and unfortunately, kind of, I'd say, increasingly Sinn Féin. I think there's a lot of pressure put on the Greens, but I do definitely understand that, and do think they're probably guilty of it sometimes. But on the other hand, any of these plans will always have a consultation process where people can engage and can give their opinions and that kind of thing. And maybe they're not advertised well enough, or like promoted well enough, or not, don't reach out enough. But there was a really interesting case just a couple of weeks ago where IBEC came out and said they want Dublin City Council to pause the implementation of their new city centre traffic plans because they said it will affect access to the city centre and businesses in the capital. And this became a big news story just kind of 3 weeks ago, and it was all over kind of radio and TV being discussed. And then it turned out that, that consultation was open for months and months, and it closed a few months ago. And IBEC didn't put anything into the consultation. They didn't engage with the process, and then
Yeah.
just put out essentially a press release to try and control the narrative. So I think there's all those kind of like underhanded tactics going on that really make it hard to kind of for anyone, be it the Greens or anyone else with the climate message, to cut through and actually engage with the public.
Yeah.
I think the media plays a big role in this too.
Yeah.
So, like, if we're talking about climate action, this city centre plan that she's talking about, that she's sort of engaging in like a culture war about, where's the discussion of health? Like, we're taking predominantly diesel vehicles out of the city. Like, those diesel vehicles cause everything from heart disease to cancer. It stunts children's development. Until we have a joined up conversation, and until our journalists have that joined up conversation, we get these really one-sided views, which are just so and so says something because they've got a platform, they've put a press release out, whatever. Like, that's not how this works, and we won't actually make any progress by just ignoring everything else. And I think
Yeah.
that's going to become more and more important as we are going to have to spend more money on these things, to go, the money is spent here, but here is where we're saving too, because that's a big part of it as well.
Well, Thomas Spencer, I actually went to look and see what kind of benefits could come from these bloody lunatic cyclists, and I found some. So the NTA had a study put out. It was from last year, but let me find the facts. So walking, wheeling and cycling. This is it pertains just to Dublin metropolitan area, which is basically it's an area from Donabate and Fingal to Greystones and Wicklow in the south, and as far west as Kilcock in County Kildare, so pretty big region. So I found that walking, wheeling and cycling in this area saves the HSE 64.5 million. So that's the equivalent to the cost of over 1.7 million GP appointments, which if anyone's tried to ring their GP lately, it's very hard to get an appointment. So that's a good saving. What other nice kind of benefits were there in terms of economic benefits? Residents walking, wheeling and cycling create an annual economic benefit for individuals and the Dublin metropolitan area of 2.39 billion euro. Those walking and cycling instead of driving save greenhouse gas emissions equivalent to 1.69 million flights from Dublin Airport to London. And then actually something that might be of interest to Regina is that 72% of residents support building cycle tracks. And that, like, even if that means less room for traffic on the road. So she's not even kind of keeping up to date with what the public even want. Her kind of thing is speaking to the wrong audience, I think, if she's trying to reach the masses.
I mean, I think she has her audience. Do you know what I mean? And she knows knows exactly who she's talking to. I think that would be my take on it. So yeah, I think that's kind of very bike and Dublin centric final election chat. Anything else on elections before we move on?
Yeah, I would say go and listen to 2 episodes ago of this podcast. There's a brilliant breakdown of pre-election. What should you talk to candidates about? What are the resources that are out there? Things like Friends of the Earth Island. They have a myth-busting resource. It's a brilliant podcast. It covers a lot. And I want to hype you guys up and say that everyone should go and listen to that.
Thanks very much, Tom. We'll take that.
To be honest, when you guys told me that we were going to have a scandalous story about riding, I thought it was going to be a bit dirtier than this, but I've enjoyed that story.
And I suppose linked then our second story,
That links us in perfectly, doesn't it?
It does. Our second story really links, I think, to what we were saying about the confusion, about the mixed messaging, about the kind of disingenuousness of a lot of the debate that goes on. And it's linked to a study that's come out by the ESRI about greenwashing. So basically it's that, a lot of Irish people really struggle to spot greenwashing claims in advertising, and the ESRI did a study where they kind of trained people how to spot greenwashing. And so, what was interesting was that the people who were trained in spotting greenwashing were also more likely to be suspicious of genuine claims, um, but in a kind of positive uh, finding, people who learned about greenwashing tactics reported being more willing to engage in climate action, including using climate policies to inform their voting behavior. So I think like one of the findings of this study is that, you know, or maybe not a finding, but one of the things that's pointed out in this study is that it's just so messy. There are so many disingenuous claims coming from politicians, but also from advertisers, that it's really, really difficult for people to kind of separate the greenwash from the genuine, sustainable messaging. So delighted that we have you here, Tom, to discuss greenwashing a bit.
My favorite soapbox. I mean, the thing that's interesting is it was sort of sparked by some analysis by the European Commission. So they found that more than half of environmental claims in adverts were either vague, misleading, or unfounded. So that's pretty damning. And like the reason the companies are doing this is it's a key differentiator. Why am I buying your product or your service over your competitor? Because I hope it's more ethical and I want my money to go and do something good. But what I thought was really interesting was the RTE article ends with a real negative. So it finishes, however, the study found that even when people are informed of greenwashing terms and ads, it simply makes them more skeptical of all environmental claims. Now, that's really interesting, and we need to be aware of that. And, I think that probably is going to have more impact on smaller businesses because they're typically ones that are being more ethical, more sustainable. But I had a question for both of you. Can you actually remember a single environmental claim from any company that's actually been proved to be true? Like they've gone out and they've backed it up with any evidence?
Go on, Kira.
I mean, I'm going to say that my clients are pretty good at it.
Yeah, that's a really good question, Tom. I think the thing that
BP. Sorry, they're fantastic at what they do.
I think the thing that occurred to me when I was considering this a bit is, like for me, I think my way of overcoming greenwashing is to have take really broad brush strokes. So I'm lucky enough to live in Dublin. I don't need a car. I'm wouldn't eat meat all that much because I know there can be some kind of sustainable meat, but it's really hard to tell. So I'm pretty much vegetarian. Um, and then the other one that came to mind with me is like using Green Earth Organics, which I haven't done in a while, but their ethos is really good and they source everything organically. And for me, I'm like, and from the chats that we've had with Kenneth, he genuinely cares, and that kind of underpins his business. So for me, it's kind of their messaging, but it's also kind of their approach. And that's for me, I'm like, well, if it's good enough for you to be selling, then it's good enough for me. But in terms of actual claims, I didn't realize until I kind of read this that, I don't know. I don't know who I do believe in when I see that kind of messaging. Yeah.
Well, the skepticism goes a long way.
I think having that skepticism is helpful because it's, I suppose, a pathway for you to learn about. Well, then you have to figure out, well, I have to do something. So you kind of go one or two ways. I suppose it's helpful or not helpful depending which way you go. You either go and you educate yourself about what the real impacts you can make are, how like reducing like certain uses, like I suppose it's adapting and changing your lifestyle, how you can do that to actually make an actual impact. Or you go the way where you just become really skeptical and you just lean into any old brand, which to be honest doesn't make a difference. Like if you're skeptical and you're not buying, and you're supporting a brand that is greenwashing, doesn't matter.
So I think the thing as well is that like what you were kind of referring to there is like the solution is to stop buying things, is to buy less stuff. Like that's one of the big solutions that just totally goes against the whole purpose of advertising anyways. So yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, this is something I think about a lot because for anyone who doesn't know, I run a food marketing agency. That's right, I'm a capitalist. But what I try to do with our clients is we try to hone in on not what do they do well? Because realistically, they're all producing products. That's obviously step one failed. Reduce, like producing something, you're going against what you should be doing. But there is lots of amazing things they do that I think can help educate. From the point, I suppose, where I try to come from is, I try to look at what are the stories what are the things they do in their business really well that are going to inspire us as consumers to support like the likes of Green Earth Organics, that are going to help us support the people who are making a really genuine effort.
I think there's two forms of greenwashing. One is the sort of softer side of things, which is maybe more a lack of transparency. Companies that could be doing a bit better, but maybe they struggle to know how. Could their product be packaged in cardboard or non-plastic, but that's more expensive and they struggle and they're not sure where to go, and maybe it's a white lie. They just tell a small white lie because they don't know how to be better. And then there's
Yeah.
the other side of greenwashing, the really like insidious stuff, which for me is actually, when you boil it down, it's exploitation. So I used to get really cross because actually a lot of companies are deliberately profiting from misleading their customers. Buy our
Yeah.
thing because it's the green one and that's why it's €2 more than the alternative. But it's also playing, I've realized it's playing on your mental health too. Like, we're walking around all the time going, please, someone make it okay. I just want this to be better. And when someone comes along and goes, stop thinking, like, Kira, you've had a bad day, just spend a bit more money. This is going to make you feel better. And we've got the rest. Don't worry about this. We've got your back. Like, that's really horrible exploitation. And like,
Yeah.
one of the things we keep talking about is sort of this lack of climate literacy. People don't really have all the information they deserve. They don't have much time. And like that's being exploited by these companies. And that's why I think what we need ultimately is some legislation to protect people. Like, I don't want to protect consumers because we're not just consumers, we're people too.
Yeah.
Now, there is EU legislation coming in 2026, but that feels so far away. We have nationalized legislation on other things too. And look, greenwashing is becoming more and more refined, more sophisticated every month. They're finding loopholes and getting through it. So I'm worried that whatever's being worked on now, by the time that's implemented, it's just going to be out of date. So
Yeah.
how do we protect people?
And just to say, I suppose when I read this story, and one of the comments from Shane Timmons from the SRI was that we need better greenwashing legislation, and you're definitely the first person I ever heard kind of talking about that, Tom. So great to have you here to discuss this.
We're all trying our best.
Yeah.
we just need someone to help us. So it's not our burden. Like, that's the big thing. And like, I don't know about you, if you've ever tried to contact the Advertising Standards Agency, it used to be ASAI, that's really hard. You have to know the inner workings of how to put a complaint in order to make it like stand up. And the same with like the complaints council. I have a complaint in with the press ombudsman at the moment. You have to jump through so many hoops to make it work. Look, I'm boring. I've got enough time in my day to make these complaints and chase them up. If you're an ordinary person and you have to deal with everything that we all have to deal with every day, and you don't have time or money or whatever, these things are way too hard. We need more protection. And like, I think a public body that works for us, like a green ombudsman, a greenwashing ombudsman, something like that, who works for us.
Yeah. Yeah. I heard a really interesting podcast a few years ago, and it was just talking about, I suppose, the stress that trying to be climate conscious places on women specifically. So sorry, you guys, you're not included in this podcast. But it was interesting. Like, there was a woman and she came on and she's like, do you know what? Fuck trying to be sustainable consumer. She's like, I don't have time for that. Like, I have 6 kids. I have to feed them all. I have to work. I have to da-da-da-da. She's like, I don't have time to spend half an hour trying to find a sustainable version of a jumper. She was like, do you know, that time could be better well spent. Could be better spent on, emailing a politician about like what you're saying, or even what you're doing, Tom, like actually contacting the ASAI and reporting kind of suspected, like, even if you're not sure, just like reporting it and getting people to look at it. I suppose it's that thing of the skepticism. Sometimes you don't need to get too bogged down in it. Like, don't get kind of distracted from what the actual problem is.
Yeah, I think we were saying there, Kira, just about it being so difficult for people, and it's compounded by businesses, it's compounded by
Yeah.
politicians, and it really is. I feel it's getting messier and messier, and especially the fact that we hear about all these initiatives, all these government plans, and yet our emissions still are barely coming down here. I think what really links well to a lot of what we've been saying so far today is the worldwide independent network world survey on global warming and climate change that has had some really interesting findings. So, first of all, it found that just 60% of people believe the government is not taking enough climate action. But also that, there's a bit of a lack of willingness from people to change their own behavior. And then just kind of seems like a lack of knowledge about where emissions is coming from. So just 4% of the Irish public attribute farming as the main cause of global warming. Now, that comes with a bit of caveat that one of the other options, the options in that were industries, people's behavior, natural causes. So industries can mean different things to other people, to different people. So it could be the agri industry. But once again, like people, only 17% said they'd stop taking flights, 16% said they'd stop driving, and just 15% said they'd reduce their meat consumption. And meat consumption is one that we definitely need to be reducing in Ireland, where we're one of the highest meat consumers per capita in the world. And the evidence couldn't be clearer that we need to do that. And then 80% said they'd prioritize recycling, which is a pretty low impact kind of climate action. So I think the survey, kind of depressingly, really highlights the confusion there, the kind of lack of awareness, the total failure of the media to get effective, meaningful messaging across.
I think too, if you look back, the fact that they're saying we should prioritize recycling. There's a brilliant Climate Town YouTube video on this where he talks about how recycling was basically born out of the plastic industry, which means born out of the oil industry, as a way to distract from what they're doing. It put the onus on us, not on them. And that's the thing we're seeing time and time again. We're in this difficult thing. Yes, the emphasis, the onus should be placed on those biggest emitters, which are not individuals. They are a handful of the worst companies, like Ryanair. They're our biggest emitter. But if just 17% of people say that they're not going to take flights, well, that gives them an instant out to go, well, if you didn't take as many flights, we wouldn't put as many on. We're just responding to demand. And we have to have personal accountability on these things. And again, exactly as you hit on, Dara, look, there is a bit of industry is quite an opaque term. Everyone has a different image of it. But agriculture is our biggest source of emissions. In fact, it's 2.2 times the emissions of industry. So
yeah.
Until we have these honest conversations about where it's coming from, and there has to be some personal accountability in it too. We're just stuck.
Yeah, and there is research that really shows the importance of leadership and people championing environmental messages. The impact of them actually living a green, environmentally friendly life is quite significant. I think kind of linked to this was a proposed good news story for us this week. And I've definitely gotten sucked in by the greenwashing, it seems. So there was an article in The Guardian this week that says Coldplay beats emissions target for world tour. So they announced a couple of years ago that they weren't going to tour until they found a more sustainable way of touring. And they announced they started going on tour again this year. And they announced that their emissions are 59% lower than their previous tour. And I thought, geez, that's absolutely brilliant, because I love going to gigs and, I am quite conscious that, that's probably, there's probably very high emissions associated with that. And are all these kind of tours,
And you're a big Coldplay fan.
Well,
Number one fan.
Just on that, the big reason Anna is sickened that she's not here, it's not because because Tom's
It's
here.
because she's joined
It's because she
Coldplay.
loves Coldplay, and she's so sorry to not be here to discuss Coldplay. They're playing in Croke Park. They're doing 5 nights, and Anna has tickets to every single night. So sorry you can't be here, Anna. But no, I love going to gigs, and I did think about that, and I was like, oh, that's great news, because they're kind of leading the way, they're pioneering, and if every other, artist and touring band kind of takes the lead from them and learns from them, then that's a really difficult to reduce emissions industry that's reducing its emissions. And I thought, oh, good news story. And then Tom, turns out maybe not so good news.
Yeah, it goes to the feast. Sorry. Look, maybe this ties back to what we were just talking about before. Maybe it's the overly healthy dose of skepticism. So look, back in 2022, they are partnered with Neste, who are an oil refiner. They're responsible for a huge amount of deforestation to produce palm oil. They've also had relationships with like BMW that are a little bit opaque. Having looked at it, Transport Environment, who had written about these relationships at the time, have rolled back and said, look, we put pressure on them through The Guardian and others. They responded to it, and this is more of a positive story. I think for me, it's still having that little bit of skepticism to go, good, we're in the right direction. But I think I still want to listen to actual scientists, not The Scientist by Coldplay, and like make sure that we're making the right progress.
Very good. Very good. Yeah, so there was, like, they said that their claims were verified by an MIT professor, but I haven't looked into it. I suppose the one thing for me is that they, as part of this initiative, that for every ticket they sell, they plant a tree. And if those trees are being used to kind of, well, that's 7 million trees, but they have also reduced, they're using trains a bit more and whatever. But if that tree planting is used as a kind of offset, then it is probably absolute nonsense. But
that's what when you asked us what companies are you kind of skeptical of, anyone that tells me they're planting a tree top, I'm just like, oh.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, sometimes it is genuine, but
yeah, and to be fair, I think that's the first thing.
I'll look into it.
Yeah.
I'll figure it
Yeah,
out.
but that's the
And
first.
this is good news. We shouldn't turn our noses up at like actual good news. Like, this is something that is to be embraced. Someone is doing something about it when others aren't. So like, I don't want to throw the baby out of the bathwater, but yeah, there are little bits
No,
where
Tom.
you kind of go,
no positivity on this podcast. Have you not been listening? Go away with your with your optimism. It's disgusting.
Yeah. But no, I mean, I definitely, I just took it totally at face value as good news and didn't look into it at all. And then when you said to me, Tom, I was like, okay, I should look into it. So yeah, no, I mean, there probably is some good news. It's good to see, even that they're kind of thinking about it and trying to look at different ways of doing things. Also, just to say very quickly that Anna's actually not a big Coldplay fan at all. There's a little greenwash. That's a little greenwash tactic there. Just tell a huge lie, and then just kind of throw in the factual claim afterwards. So there you go. All right. Our last.
Sorry, we have a good story.
Oh no, we've one more bad story first, and then we have a good story. This is that we talked about Ireland missing its emissions and European emissions targets last year, and we've had some news this week, Tom, about, I guess, the repercussions of missing our European targets.
Yeah, so we've known for a lot, like, these are obviously legally binding. We signed up to the Paris Agreement. We have pledged to cut our emissions by 51%. We're currently on course for a best case scenario of 29%. There is an argument to be, or the documents that report on it say that actually, if we increase data center usage, all the other things, we might actually only come out with 11% reduction in emissions.
Is this by 2030?
Yeah, that's by 2030.
Oh, Lord.
So that would cost us 5 billion. That would be our first fine, which would increase every year that we miss. Now, obviously, we know that a bit like dieting, if you start early, if you've got a deadline to get ready for, if you start early, it's only a little bit each week. We're so far off course already that we're already going to be racking up fines for a decade at least on top of that. We're going to have to cut so severely on top of this. So, I mean, look, for me, there's two really big questions. Like, this is starting to look like gross negligence. We had the climate case that was a few years ago, which was the people of Ireland asking the government to act responsibly in our best interests, and they're still not. So, like, the first question I have is, when do we have political accountability for this? Like, will Micheál Martin, he's worth €3 million, that's his net worth. Is he going to pay towards the fine? Will Michael O'Leary be put on trial for his inaction on emissions? Like, when are those people who are failing us actually going to face the repercussions of their failure? And then the other part, seeing as it's my favorite topic, I'm really worried about the greenwashing implications for this. So those fines, when we pay them, they're effectively given to those countries that are compliant. They've cut their emissions as they said they would, or even more than they said they would.
Wow.
I'm worried that this will open up a doorway for governments like ours to go, look, we're offsetting our emissions. We've given Estonia or whoever this money because we've failed, but actually we haven't failed because we've balanced the books.
Yeah,
I'm really worried about that.
So yeah, it's funny actually. I thought you were going to say something else, because what I'm a bit worried about is like how anti green people kind of spin that, you know, how they'll say, oh, this is Europe, you know, this is being, you know, this is being dictated to by Europe. And sure, look at all the cycle lanes that we've put in Dublin, and they're still fining us, you know. And sure, farmers can't even do this and that, and they're still fining us, you know. And that's, I think, what really worries me, is because there is, you know, this whole episode we've been talking about all the misinformation, all the confusion. And so people think that there's loads of action going on here and loads of restrictions. And despite that, we're still going to get these huge fines. And that's where I think, you know, there could be some really like dangerous narratives that emerge from it. So yeah, and totally a failure of the media is a big part of that potentially happening, I would say.
And I suppose just to add to the mountain, then I suppose we're just pouring all this money that we could invest into actual climate action into fines.
Yeah, like that's absolutely it. You could just give €1,000 to everybody. Do you know? Like, do that. Say if we make the, you know, if we make the climate targets, we'll give €2,000 to everyone, and you can do it. You like, you know, like, it's crazy money. Yeah.
And you shared a story as well, which was from The Guardian from this week. Debt payments by countries most vulnerable to the climate crisis soar. And it says debt payments by the 50 countries most vulnerable to the climate crisis have doubled since the start of the coronavirus pandemic. So what we're actually seeing really is this continuation of colonialism, which is, lads, you're already vulnerable to the climate crisis. Give us our money back. Here's some interest on top of that. And by the way, we're not going to cut our emissions, which is going to make you more vulnerable. So...
And then we're going to complain when you land at our doorstep.
And we're also not going to give the money that we've promised to help with your like loss and damage and climate adaptation. And it's not great, not a great picture. But yeah, I think sometime we could delve into that whole international climate finance stuff again. I think one of the cops, when Mia Mottley, the Prime Minister of Barbados, gave an amazing speech about that. There's a lot to unpack there.
And in fairness, Regina Doherty is on the case now, so
yeah, it's that once we sort out that cycling lobby, you know,
it should be sorted in a few weeks, I'd say.
We'll finish with a good news story, will we?
Let's do it.
So our good news story, I feel a bit sheepish. It's definitely not equivalent to the bad news.
Go on, we need to take it wherever we can.
But it is about the deposit return scheme. That once again, there have been so many negative stories since the start of the year. 150 million drinks containers have been returned under the deposit return scheme, and half of those came in the month of May. So 75 million bottles and cans were returned through the deposit return scheme in the month of May. So, you know, when that when this scheme started, we saw all the videos of things not working, people complaining. That's a huge number of bottles and cans that can now be, have a better chance of being better recycled, basically. So that is good news.
I have an extra bit of
Yeah.
good news that has started since we've jumped on this podcast,
Oh, go on.
which is because I've been the ghost of the feast, I want to come in and bring some positive news.
Climate change is over.
Hooray, we fixed it. Yeah. Since we started recording, Antonio Gutierrez, our friend at the UN, has made a statement. And his statement is, many governments restrict or prohibit advertising of products that harm human health, like tobacco. I urge every country to do the same with fossil fuel companies by banning their advertising. And I urge news media and tech corporations to stop taking fossil fuel advertising. That's about as bold as you get from the UN. And he is pretty bold as UN representatives go. I think that is very good news that we have that as a public representative of us all to say that.
And
Brilliant.
That is great news. Now we just need him to sort out the cycling lobby in Dublin, and then and then it's all gravy.
Vegetarian gravy.
All right, before we finish up then, any actions? I suppose I'll just rehash if you haven't, if you're listening to this before elections and you haven't decided the whichcandidate.ie website is great for the European elections. Also, well, it's not until the end of the month, but if you're in Dublin, highly recommend the monthly cycle with iBike Bop, and a shout out for the Rethinking Growth conference that's on the 25th and 26th of June. Ciara, I think you've a couple of actions there as well.
Yeah, I suppose just when we were having a chat about the report from the journal that, kind of the lack of action people were willing to actually take, I was having a think about why are people so resistant to it, and that reminded me of our 2 episodes we did with fantastic Owen Gallivan, which is why are we stuck, exploring the psychology of climate change, and then the other one is now a good time to freak out, and the answer is yes, but they're, despite the topic, quite relaxing, I think. So they're nice ones. And then on the topic of farming, actually, Lisa Fingleton, probably one of our biggest fans at this point, there's a project she did a couple of years ago now at this stage, but Voices from the Field. And it's just looking at, I suppose I'm very big at, I come from a communication standpoint. I'm always like, how can we paint the picture of what the alternative is and what is the positive alternative? And she has done a lot of brilliant work with farmers on, I suppose, reimagining what the future of farming could look like if we actually do make proper changes to agriculture. So we'll put there's a load of different videos about that where she's worked with different farmers from all around Ireland. So we can link that for anyone who wants to check it out. It's really nice.
Great stuff. Tom, I'm not sure if you have any other actions there.
Yeah,
if you don't, you're not coming back.
Right, well, I better get something. No, I was going to say that it's the start of Pride Month, and I was going to recommend that everyone goes and has a look at how the LGBTQIA plus community is more vulnerable to the climate crisis. Ciara has talked about the relationship between women and the climate crisis, and they're a particularly vulnerable group, but I think we need all the allies we can, and we should be better allies to people during Pride. So go and learn about that. There's some really good resources at Greenpeace and plenty of others. So yeah, just a thing from me.
All right, Tom, you can come back. That was a very good action.
Woohoo!
Great stuff. That is it for this week. Tom, thanks so much for joining us, and we'll hopefully have you back soon.
Thanks a million for having me. Thank you.
Do you want to thank me?
And Ciara, thanks. Thanks to Ciara as always.
Ciara.
And we'll be back next week with Anna after, I think, is it 4 Coldplay concerts she's seeing this week. So we'll have all the details from her on that. And if you want to support the work we do, you can do that on buymeacoffee.com/The Climate Alarm. That's it. Until next week.
I'm going to give a shout out for people to leave us a review as well, actually, because that really helps people find us if people leave a review. So if you haven't reviewed us yet, give us 5 stars or I'm sending Tom after you. He's going to report you to the ASAI.
All right. That is it for this week. Goodbye.
luck. Vegetarian gravy.